The emperor was informed that the council of ministers had assembled. The emperor went in, followed by Prince Joseph and Lucien. I have been told it was easy to see on the faces of a few ministers the consternation, fear, and discouragement of this council, where such important matters were being debated. There was mention of an abdication in favor of the King of Rome, wanting above all to save France, and learning of the state of insurrection in the chamber. The emperor allowed the possibility that he would agree to this, but still confident in the patriotism of many of its members. He sent out as representatives Prince Lucien and ministers Carnot, Fouché, Caulaincourt, and Davout, who left the Élysée at 3 p.m. The emperor said to them, "Go speak to them of France's interests, which must be dear to all its representatives. When you return, I shall make the choice my duty dictates." Prince Lucien, tasked with giving an account of the events and results of the battle, asked the chamber for its help in taking the measures necessary in this time of danger. The chamber appeared to rally to the eloquence of this orator when Lafayette restored discord to the point where the chamber could no longer be counted on. Filled with such noble indignation against the representatives who misjudged to such a point all that was great, generous, and devoted in the conduct of the emperor, who had the power under law to dissolve a chamber hostile toward him, Prince Lucien urged him to overturn it. The emperor did not, but was indignant over the violence being done to him. An anxious crowd had gathered in the Marigny Avenue. I was returning in a carriage along the Champs-Élysées when, at that intersection, the crowd prevented me from going any further. I got out and told the coachman to return to the stables. I allowed the crowd to carry me to below the terrace where the emperor was strolling with Prince Lucien. The crowd was huge, and each time the emperor appeared at the end of a long path where he was strolling, cries of "Vive l'Empereur" issued from all these indignant people who were demanding weapons in a single word to crush the domestic enemy and march against the one approaching Paris. Only a word. Certainly the victims were chosen and would fall to the vengeance of the people. It certainly required a superhuman courage on the part of the emperor to not let himself be carried away by the popular enthusiasm. His great spirit remained calm, and France shall forever remain thankful to him for this, for it would have meant civil war on top of foreign war. I remember perfectly a moment when Prince Lucien and the emperor reached the end of the path. Prince Lucien seemed to be saying, "Will you allow so many powerless cries without taking advantage of them to serve France?" This prince, in a pamphlet published in 1835 called La Vérité sur les 100 jours, the truth about the 100 days, tells us what was going on in his heart and that of his brother. Facing 20,000 cries of "Vive l'Empereur" and the sublime expression that spread over the features of Napoleon, captivated by the event, I interrupted a silence of several minutes by saying to him, "Well, do you hear the people? It is the same all over France. Will you abandon it to the factions?" Halting and responding with a wave of the hand to the crowd's cries of enthusiasm, he said to me, "Am I superhuman to be able to return 1,000 wayward deputies to a union that alone can save us? Or am I a miserable party leader who will needlessly start a civil war? No, never. In Brumaire, we had to draw the sword for the good of France. Today, for the good of France, we must cast that sword away from us. Go and try to win over the chambers. I can achieve anything with their support. I could do much in my own interest without them, but I could not save the motherland. Go. I forbid you, when leaving, to address these people who demand weapons. I will attempt everything for France. I will attempt nothing for myself." The Prince Lucien adds, those are the words spoken by Napoleon. My eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in my life, I fell to my knees before him, admiring from the bottom of my heart this father of the nation, betrayed and misunderstood by misguided representatives. Let us add that such a supreme sacrifice earned this man the rock of St. Helena for a prison. As I have quoted the emperor's words preserved for us by the prince, let it also be mentioned that in the same pamphlet, he indignantly refutes an accusation rather widespread at the time that he urged the emperor to abdicate in favor of the King of Rome in order to become regent. The Prince Lucien states, Have I ever committed a cowardly act to acquire a throne? Had Napoleon II succeeded his father, what claim could I have had to the regency? Did not our family have at its head my older brother, Prince Joseph, one of the most enlightened minds, this brother who was like a father to me in my childhood? We are not of a blood to respond to affection with ingratitude, to undermine the head of our family in a cowardly fashion by secret maneuvers, and to sacrifice memories and conscience to the sad rage for power. Everyone knows that during my retirement in Italy, I received several offers to return to power, either in France or on a foreign throne, and letters from my family, from Talleyrand and Fouché, who were in turn trying to get me to accept Napoleon's offers. I do not believe it is very common to refuse such offers, and it is at least a likely presumption that one is not devoured with ambition. Having mentioned the article that refutes the rumor circulating at the time in which he absolves himself of this libel, I return to the Chamber of Deputies where he had been sent by the emperor. What did he find there? A continuous session in violation of the charter. Fear of dissolution had led it to this decision at the instigation of General Lafayette, whose misplaced patriotism made him serve the cause of the enemy rather than that of his country. The Chamber of Peers, where Marshal Ney had stirred up trouble by an exaggerated description of our losses at Waterloo, did not prove any wiser. Strengthened by our dissensions and by assurances given to it, the enemy marched on Paris at full speed. At 11 p.m., a council was held, with Prince Lucien presiding. The resolution arrived at there, was taken to the chamber and opposed by Monsieur de Lafayette, who said it did not meet the general expectation and that only an abdication could put an end to the crisis that existed in France. Thus, while Carnot saw in the emperor's abdication the ruin of France, others were pressing for it with all their might. Not exercising his right to dissolve the chambers, the emperor drew back only before civil war. As the supreme judge of the French people, with his goal of order and well-being for France, he could only proceed with help. The chambers refused him. He abdicated. Nothing was more constitutional or proves better that the aim of his politics was a monarchy based on those principles. Had he acted otherwise and civil war ensued, his name would have been cursed, and he would have been held responsible for all the bloodshed as a result. When the emperor learned of the resolution reached by the chamber and that his offer of devotion to the country was being ignored, he said to Prince Joseph, "They are insane, and Lafayette and his friends are naive politicians. They want my abdication and fear that I will not give it to them. I shall do so and hold them responsible for the evils that descend on France. They want me to abdicate in favor of my son, but that is a farce when the enemy is at the Paris gates and the Bourbon right behind them. United, we could save ourselves. Divided, we are helpless." It was nearly 1 a.m. when the following declaration to the French people was taken to the two chambers, the Chamber of Peers by Count Carnot and the Chamber of Deputies by the Duke of Otranto, Fouché. People of France, in undertaking war to defend national independence, I was counting on the unity of all efforts, all wills, and the help of all national authorities. I had reason to hope for success, and I had challenged the declarations of all the powers united against me. Circumstances appear to have changed. I offer myself in sacrifice to the hatred of France's enemies. May their declarations be sincere, and may they want only my person. My political life is at an end, and I proclaim my son Emperor of the French under the name Napoleon II. The ministers shall form a provisional government council, and on behalf of my son, I urge them to organize without delay a regency by means of law. Unite for public salvation and to remain an independent nation. Signed, Napoleon. June 22nd. While the act of abdication was being finalized, the emperor was strolling in the Élysée garden with his brothers, like the day before. The Marigny Avenue was filled with people shouting, "Vive l'Empereur!" 1,000 times. His Majesty was greeting this multitude, eager to see him. When he was informed, there only remained for him to sign. He quickly went in and came back to the garden to join his brothers to continue his stroll. A few cries of "Down with the priests" could also be heard. The chamber thus received this abdication so badly desired. They deliberated about it, and in the afternoon a deputation from each came to express the thanks with which they accepted his noble sacrifice. The emperor replied to both these deputations: "I thank you for the sentiments you have expressed. I wish my abdication could bring France happiness, but I have little hope of this, as it leaves the state without a leader, without any political existence. The time wasted on overthrowing the monarchy could have been used to place France in a position to crush the enemy. I recommend that France promptly reinforce its armies. Whoever wishes peace must be prepared for war. Do not place this great nation at the mercy of foreigners, and beware of seeing your hopes deceived. Therein lies the danger. Whatever position I might find myself in, I shall always be at ease if France is happy. I entrust my son to France and hope it will not forget that I abdicated only for him. I have also made this great sacrifice for the good of the nation. It is only through my dynasty that it can hope to be free, happy, and independent." That evening, when he went to bed, the emperor asked me what effect his abdication caused in Paris. I said to him with deep sadness and great emotion, "Sire, the people don't understand it. They are astonished that your majesty does not overturn the chamber and assume dictatorship at so serious a time. Paris fears the enemy's approach. It has no faith in the men in charge of its affairs. And all whom I saw today state that it is like handing them over, bound hand and foot. The ministry is accused of treason. They are so angry that they seem to want victims. Only a word is needed from your majesty, and they will find some in the ministry in the chamber. Sire, all are convinced they will not get the King of Rome and will have to endure the Bourbons' revenge." The emperor explained, "Only the abdication can save France. Faced with the abandonment of the chambers, to act in any other way than I am doing would bring about a civil war, and I would have its blood on my conscience. This I do not want." After the abdication, the emperor remained a few more days at the Élysée. The next day and the following, there were many carriages in the courtyard. The third day, they decreased, but the public turmoil around the residence increased. The emperor thought that such demonstrations could hinder negotiations and that his abdication could be slandered by his enemies who feared the people's manifestations in favor of their elected choice, and thus withdrew almost stealthily from so much proof of love and affection by retiring to Malmaison. Before leaving, he sent to his former comrades in arms the following proclamation. It never reached the army, as the sentiments it expressed frightened the new governing bodies too much. "Soldiers, when I yielded to the necessity that forces me to leave the courageous French army, I take with me the happy certainty that through the eminent service the motherland expects from it, it shall justify the praise even our enemies cannot deny it. Soldiers, although absent, I shall follow your actions. I know each corps, and none can win some reported advantage without my doing justice to the courage it displays. You and I have been slandered, and men unworthy of appreciating your work saw in the signs of attachment you showed me a zeal which I was the sole object. Let your future services teach them that it was the motherland above all you were serving in obeying me, and that if I share in any way in your affection, I owe this to my deep love for France, our common mother. Soldiers, only a few more efforts, and the coalition shall dissolve. Napoleon will recognize you through the blows you strike. Save the honor and the independence of France. Remain to the very end as I have known you for the past 20 years, and you shall be invincible." 2 days before leaving Paris for Malmaison, I spoke to the emperor when he was retiring about a letter I had received that morning in which I was invited to go to Saint-Philippe de Roule. The place where I was to meet the person was given, and the fanciful nature of the letter having awakened my curiosity. I had gone there, as my ego led me to believe this regarded me. I had approached the meeting place, letter in hand. A woman was there praying. At the noise I made in moving a chair to approach her, she turned around sharply. In addition to the elegant and slim figure I had noticed at first, she revealed a face that was veiled, but not enough to disguise that she was young and pretty. I told the emperor. I bowed respectfully as I came near her, and I asked in a way how I could be of service to her. She remained silent for a moment, then, much embarrassed, confessed that the emperor's misfortunes were of great concern to her, and increased in her a feeling of attachment she had had toward him for a long time. She would be very happy if in this moment of adversity she could express this to him. She was highly moved. I said to her, Madame, I can promise you to tell His Majesty this evening when he retires of your admiration for him, but I cannot assure you that the audience you request will be granted. See to it that it is, she said, quickly taking my hand, pressing it firmly between hers, and lifting it to her bosom. You would make me so happy. You will do it, won't you? Promise me. Madame, I can only repeat what I said to you and add that the timing is not propitious. However, I promise you to faithfully convey to the emperor the enthusiasm with which you are filled. I said to the emperor, we parted with a promise to meet tomorrow at the same time and place to convey the answer. I await your Majesty's reply. The emperor smiled over the whole thing and said to me, is she French? Her speech is more that of an Englishwoman. What can she want of me? It is an admiration which is bound to lead to an affair, and we must not allow it. I wrote to the unknown woman my regret that circumstances did not allow me to bring her my answer in person. But the emperor was leaving for Malmaison, and I was obliged to go there ahead of him. I gave my letter to a discreet man to take to her, and never heard from her again. The provisional government had been named. Names like Caulaincourt and Carnot reassured decent people, but that of the Duke of Otranto, Fouché, as president, gave cause for concern. That minister was habitually surrounded by intrigue and treachery. No sooner did he hold the emperor's abdication in his hands than he approached royalist agents with whom he negotiated the Bourbons' return to France, and while Lafayette headed a deputation sent to the enemy's camp to try to halt the march on Paris, the Duke of Otranto was inviting the heads of the same armies to come there post-haste. He had been able to master the council and had drawn within his spiderweb even Marshal Davout, who lost more than his popularity in handing over Paris without a fight. If in such sad circumstances there are names lacking in patriotism, there are others who did not lack it at all. Men like Béranger, Manuel Boulet de la Murta, in the Chamber of Deputies, carried the day against the Royalists, the Orleanists, and the Republicans, and had Napoleon II proclaimed, while in the Chamber of Peers, men like Drouot and Lebedalliere and Count Régnal de Saint-Jean d'Angely also carried the day for their side. These two chambers seemed to forget that the elevation of the King of Rome to the imperial throne was the condition for the sacrifice the emperor was imposing on himself. On June 25th, at 12:30 p.m., the emperor left the Élysée without escort and climbed into the Grand Marshal's carriage that stood waiting for him at the garden gate of Champs-Élysées. Count Bertrand was with him and Novaras on the seat. At the same time, the emperor's carriages rode out on Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré, taking to Malmaison Generals Gourgaud and Montalon, the emperor's ADCs, and his chamberlain, Count de la Casses. Baron de Miscrigny, the emperor's equerry, was on horseback at the door of the first carriage, which, followed by the escort, led people to believe that the emperor was in it. It was only after passing the city gates that the emperor, leaving the Grand Marshal's carriage, climbed into his own to proceed to Malmaison. There he was greeted by his adopted daughter, Queen Hortense, with an affection as respectful as it was touching. 25 men from the Imperial Infantry Guard, commanded by one officer, were there to watch over the emperor's safety in this residence. Prior to leaving Paris, the emperor had requested from the provisional government 2 frigates and passports to go to America. He had his secretary, Monsieur Ratteri, burn letters, memoranda, and petitions that could place the signers in jeopardy. I remained at the Élysée Bourbon for few hours later than the emperor to gather up all his belongings and wait for some purchases I had made which had not yet arrived. My family was with me, dismayed by a departure that was perhaps separating us forever, and also by the misfortune gripping the country. The moment of separation was a cruel one. I embraced in turn my father, sisters, brothers and brother-in-law and left asking them to control a sorrow that was causing me to lose mastery of my own. We parted, promising to see each other the next day, and those that followed at Malmaison if the emperor stayed there a few days. After they left, I wandered through the emperor's apartment so full of eager courtiers a few days before, and today so empty that I had found myself alone there with my wardrobe boy. I took some small portable furnishings that could be useful to the emperor where he would go, such as gilt incense burners, small marble busts of the King of Rome, small framed pictures, the work of Isabey representing the prince at various ages, others of Empress Marie-Louise, and a small bronze statuette of the emperor produced during the 100 Days made by the Gauls' workshop. There was in the emperor's bedroom a superb silver washstand on a tripod in the shape of swans' necks, with a picture of the same material, the work of the silversmith Binet. My desire to take it was battled by my fear of committing a reprehensible act. The emperor had praised that piece while using it. I knew how much it would deprive him to not have it, as he liked to plunge his face into much water after shaving. This one was 15 inches in diameter and could hold a large quantity of water. The thought of pleasing him dispelled any scruples I had about taking it. I had it transported to my carriage and placed my coat over it in order to not arouse the curiosity of a passerby in Paris or along the road. I arrived at Malmaison at 6 p.m., my carriage full to breaking. That evening, as he was retiring, I told the emperor of the state of ferment in which I had left the Paris population and about my visits to Madame Plapra and Madame Walewska. The latter proposed to come to Malmaison the next day with her son. Madame Plapra had asked me to convey all her regrets about not daring to come there without his instructions. At the time of this departure, there was a theft at the Grand Marshal's of a small case containing jewelry and snuff boxes, valued at 60,000 francs. Without anyone noticing this pilferage, Count de Montholon, in his Memoirs of St. Helena, relates that there also was a theft of a considerable amount of negotiable securities in the emperor's study, which no one was aware of. I knew of the first theft, but neither in Paris nor in St. Helena did I ever hear of the second one. Thus had just come to an end the period of the 100 Days, so great in its beginning and so unfortunate in its end. Had the emperor known in Elba of the conspiracy that the army heads were plotting in his favor against the Bourbon throne, brought about by the weakness of the new government, an outmoded pretense that was as blighting to the French people as it was dangerous to the interests of the past 25 years, he would have left Elba only 1 month later. He would have avoided the March 13th declaration and the crusade against France, headed by the Emperor Alexander, and March 20 would have achieved all its goals. The emperor was ignorant of this movement and knew about it only after arriving in Grenoble. He had neither the will nor the power to anticipate it. He knew that an army which was the glory of France, often the terror of its enemies, and always, even in its setbacks, the object of Europe's admiration, could not stand to be scorned, insulted, and decimated, and could only be waiting for the moment of revenge. He therefore had in his favor his ability to assess conditions in France and the mood of the nation.